Welcome to Visual Radio for 2023. It's our first episode of the new year. I've been doing this 28 years and I'm so nervous and shaky, you know. March 2nd is Lou Reed's birthday. If you don't know who Lou Reed is, rock and roll animal, I do. You can ask me anything. I know lots about Lou. Happy birthday, Lou, up there in heaven. I'm Joe Villion, I guess, with my co-host Darren Coster. I know his name. He's Front Page News. And our guest is musician playwright Greg Paquette. And welcome.
Thank you.
Well, welcome, Greg. So you're part of the Boston music scene throughout the 80s and 90s. So where do you call home? Where's your studio at today?
I live just outside of Wilmington, North Carolina now, which is sort of in the North-South Carolina border. It's subtropical. And I've been there 17 years now. And my recording studio is in my home. I've got a room, big room, loaded with guitars and microphones and such things.
How many guitars? You had mentioned some.
I have, well, my wife's going to see this. My inventory of guitars is 14, but they're all different, and I need them all.
Yeah.
And in fact,
Tools. Individual tools.
I may need more. But yeah, they're all different, and my life as an artist, I'm a studio musician. I'm a studio artist. So you need, all guitars. They sound different. They have different characters. So that's my excuse, and I've got, whatever the sound is I want to go for. I grab the right guitar and dial it up, and I just love them anyway. So thank you. Yeah, I'm in North Carolina, and my studio's there, and my children grew up literally in a recording studio. So it's kind of cool.
I'm sure they broke a couple of your unique guitars, or
no,
did
that's
they learn
the thing.
to cherish them as much as you do?
Yeah, they were raised responsibly, and no, they when they had a respect for the instrument, then they were allowed to play the instruments. And I remember my mother-in-law saying, "I can't believe you're letting him play that expensive guitar," and I'd say, I'm more afraid of you touching that guitar than him, because they grew up having dad play the guitar for them.
Yeah, they always
and when
watch
they
it.
first start as little babies, you say, "Here," and you hold this thing and say, gentle, right? And I'm doing the same thing with my grandson right now.
That's
like every night I play guitar for him, and he just lies there and kicks and loves it. But he's strumming the guitar, and he's 7 months old, and he's it's like gentle, and it's great.
Well, that's amazing to music starts so young and it evolves. So take us through the genesis of your musical play and kind of where this project started.
Well, I was in a band through the 80s in Boston, six years, called Option One. And, like so many bands, we had our near miss with the record company toward the end, and we thought we were going to, thought all kinds of things, but it didn't happen. And, I was really tired. I mean, at the time, we called a band meeting, and I said to the band, look, I don't really want to go another 6 years. I said, I want to do something vastly different. What I want to do is, I want to write a musical. And I want to write a musical that we have presented at a local theater, but I don't want the band to be down in the pit orchestra. I want, during a song, I want the instrumentalists on stage, behind the singers. And I wanted to incorporate all the different elements of the rock concert, with theater, and in as many art forms, like, paintings, sculptures, local artists, projected. I wanted to bring in as many forms of media as I could. And I explained this to the band, and I looked around the room, and they all had these really concerned looks in their face. And that was that. Sean and John went to New York to pursue their stuff, and I went off to do the, so I sold all my big amplifiers and the PA system, and I bought, 1987, I had a home recording studio. I mean, a lot of people have them now, but like hardly anyone had them then. And I had my own recording studio. And out of stubbornness, I said, damn it, I'm gonna write this musical myself. I don't need anyone else. And I bought a little Fender Champ guitar amp. So my studio was in a bedroom in Cambridge, and it took up half of the bedroom because the mix, you know, was big in
Yeah.
those days, right? This huge Tascam 80-8 reel-to-reel. And God love my wife, she never once complained. She was always wonderful about it. But I had to get a 50-foot guitar cord that went down to the bathroom, plug into this little Fender Champ guitar amp, and then have a 50-foot mic cord that came back. So all the guitar tracks from the original soundtrack were literally an amplifier in a bathtub. And that's what you needed to do in those days. And I loved it. And I was, so, you know, the musical took 2.5 years to write. And when I was done, I was kind of tired of it. And I put it away. And went on to become a dad on purpose 3 times. And all on purpose. And, you know, I let it sleep for a long time. And I thought it was gone. I thought it was lost. And I had pretty much consigned myself to the fact that all that time was gone and wasted, and that's life and you move on. I think maybe about 10 years ago, my nephew was down visiting my son, and they needed something to do. So I said, why don't you go play in the garage, I'll give you some money or whatever. So they go out, you know, don't throw out anything important. And I was in my office working, and shortly after they went out there, my son comes in and he has a 3-ring binder. And inside of it was a floppy disk with the script. And floppies were long dead and gone by then, but I had an old floppy drive that just might work. And he had a cassette tape with a recording and then a printout of the script. And I said to him, I said, oh my God, I can't believe you found this. And he's like, what's this, Dad? And I'm like, well, it's a play I wrote called The World of Blue. He goes, you wrote a play? Yeah. And, well, you know, and I said, well, look, Chris, I said, this tape is disintegrated. It's gonna go. I said, well, it will run once. I said, you take this up to the studio, I'm working. You take it up to the studio, you put it in the JVC, clean the heads first, put it in the JVC and transfer it directly to digital. Do not stop that tape once you hit play. He goes upstairs and I can hear coming down from the studio for the first time in roughly 30 years, it might have been, I heard this music that I made that I had not heard. And I was like, oh my God, wow. And what I heard was the enthusiasm of a young musician who now had control. I was just blazing out these guitar parts, largely because like, wow, this is great, because, you know, I was usually working with other musicians and stuff, and, you know, it was fine, but, you know, it was rescued, but the problem was the music was, the tape was damaged. The tape, there was hiss, and all of the instruments in the recording kind of melded together. So I kept it there on hold, and I didn't tell Joe about it. You know, Joe's, you know, my business associate in the music industry and one of my mentors, and I never told Joe about it. And we worked on other stuff, and I brought it up a while back, and I said, well, I got this musical I wrote. He said, well, send it to me, and I sent it to him and everything. And at the time, I was working on my third solo album, and, you know, Joe calls me back immediately. He's like, Greg, you're out of your mind. Forget the album. He goes, this thing is great. You know, we just got to put this forward. We got to bring this a lot to life. And I said, okay. I said, but I got a lot of recording to do. I said, there's 9 of the songs that I have nothing on. I got to re-record 9 songs by myself. And he's, well, you got to do what you got to do. So I start to record it, and, you know, then we were getting to the place where it's sort of like, well, what's taking you so long? And this is now a few weeks ago. What's taking you so long? I said, Joe, it's just me. I got like 9 songs. You know, okay, it's just me. And he goes, it's too bad. He goes, and I said, I really wish that I could use those old recordings. And then I hear Joe on the phone. Whoa, I have an idea. I'll call you back in a couple minutes. Okay. So Joe calls me back in a couple minutes, and he says, Greg, if you can get those digital files to Rob Faboni within the next 5 minutes, he has 6 hours that he can use to remaster those.
And Faboni being
Well, for
producer
me,
of Eric Clapton and
I'm an album geek. I read the jackets. I read everything. I know who mixed. I know who mastered. And Faboni is a legend amongst guys like me. I mean, so when he said that,
Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, Planet Waves,
the band,
Bridges to Babylon, the Grammy with Keith Richards for You Win Again.
Right. So I mean, you know, I'm an album jacket guy, and I was like, I had those files to him in 2 minutes, right? So now I'm sitting there wondering, I got 6 hours to wait, and the files that I sent, they didn't sound good. Huge tape hiss, and all the instruments were kind of melded together because the particles and the physical particles on the carbon tape. So that means that we have what we call a lot of offending frequencies that are just not going to cooperate. And then I got the tapes back, I got the files back, and I just started to listen to those songs, and it was like a prodigal son coming home. I said, my God, I can't believe this, what he did with these. And that's why the experts are the experts. I mean, I can mix, I can master, but I don't, because there are guys who live for that, and that's who you go to. I mean, can I mix a song? Yeah. Can I remaster a song? Sure. But Tom Soares is a phenomenal, gifted mix engineer. Michael Stern, phenomenally gifted. I use those guys. That's their thing. Mastering, I don't go near it. I want to use guys who live by that.
And let's give a little secret out to the whole audience. Did you ever hear of the band's The Last Waltz movie? Very famous movie.
Oh.
So Fraboni did the engineering for Martin Scorsese, the guy who did the gangster movies, right? And what he did with the original, I bought the VHS off eBay because I wanted a copy of the original. He would shift the sound of the musicians on stage with the movie. So if you watch the original audio, you feel it in the theater because he's moving the sound along with those musicians on stage. They put the DVD out. They got probably some college kid out of college, who knows technically what to do. He destroyed the whole vibe of it because it's all technically perfect, but it doesn't have that intangible that makes the audience want to keep it and own it. So I bought a VHS so I would have it. Then I can transfer to my computer. I have a program where I can put the Super V into the computer, and I will have that for myself.
Yeah.
But
And
people don't know this.
it's so many things have become automated, and there is kind of hopefully an evolution that happens where maybe some more specialized. 'Cause I think what's great to hear is, to your point of, I can do this, but I'm not the best in class, right? And you stick to your lane and you do what you're best as. And
Absolutely.
you spoke a lot about your own music with a band, and now the musical. You know, musical being a loose term. Can you go into a little bit deeper of what kind of musical is this? I know you mentioned bringing the band in with the singers, but if you can kind of, and not only what was in the plan, but when you revisit it and you rehear it, maybe with the different, especially having heard it after someone who you respect so much worked on it, did something new come about that you maybe didn't expect when you had originally written the music?
Well, the first thing, upon listening to we now call them the Fraboni Rescues, because he rescued 9 songs, and they
They were unplayable before
they were unplayable, and now they're being played all over the place because we released a couple to some stations. The Spin Room, Lou Spinazzola played us for on Mixcloud, and Mark Skin Radio, who's fantastic. They've been playing it, and so it did 2 things. I mean, firstly, when I recorded all those things, I never dreamed they were intended to be a demo. I never dreamt that they would be broadcast. It was not really intended. I just, I was a rookie with recording, and
basement tapes.
They were basement tapes. Yeah, exactly. And then when they came back, they were not just usable. They had a story. And I said to Joe, Joe, this just bought us 9 months. This is 9 months. It would have taken me 9 months of sitting there in my studio by myself, recording all those songs. And I said, Joe, we just moved the plan ahead 9 months. That's what that did for us.
And for a musical play, you have the guy that worked with Scorsese on The Last Waltz. I mean, you can't get higher credentials than that.
No, and so really it really put the whole thing into fast motion, and we're extremely excited about it. So it really had a long evolution. The script I sent you was version 6.1. I mean, I rewrote it 6 times over the years, and now, within a week, I mean, there's 2 songs that are not finished, but they're mostly recorded. They're like mostly recorded, and I have a rapper down in North Carolina this weekend who's recording 2 of the tracks, and I have a gospel singer who's coming in to do a track next week, and then it's in the can. And we are going to be releasing the musical one act at a time, and basically a story, and then here's the song that plays here. So we want people to be able to come back and engage into this story. And you know, that's the plan. But it's you also mentioned loose terms. I mean, there are musicals where there's no spoken text, and then there are, you know, my big influences, you know, growing up in my household, you know, Fiddler in the Roof, Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, Showboat, Man of La Mancha, Jesus Christ Superstar, Godspell, all these were played in my house all the time. So that is my frame of reference. And my biggest hero is a contemporary writer has really got to be Pete Townsend. And he did Tommy and he did Quadrophenia. And that to me set the mark. So when the band broke up, I was kind of bummed. I was bummed. Everyone was bummed, but I said, I don't care about this, I don't care about that. I simply want to create the highest level of art that I could create with my skills. And I decided I was going to write a musical. And
What year?
86 is when I think I made that decision. And you know, I had no idea the scope of it. I really so grossly underestimated it. And I loved. I thought that Pete Townsend was the highest mark, but I also thought, you know, there's stuff I can take from that. But I wanted a stage play, like, you know, Fiddler, all these things. And I said, I need something dramatic. I need something dramatic. I want a good plot. I wonder where I'm going to get it. And I looked over my shoulder, and my books were all there. And I'm a history buff, and I had just massive amounts of history books, which I just devoured and go back and read. And I looked at them, and I realized that all the drama that I need. If you look at Fiddler, if you look at Sound of Music, if you look at Man of La Mancha, these things all take place during some sort of crisis, some sort of big crisis. And you know, you look at Quadrophenia. I mean, this is a drug-infused generation trying to find an identity. You know, it's all about crisis, and that's where the drama arises from. And I looked over and I saw history, and I said, you know, I thought the campaigns of Alexander. I thought about, you know, Germanicus, the Emperor Augustus, who followed Julius Caesar, and I said, there's so much drama there that the situations that we're building here are going to be extracted from that. I wanted the history to inspire it, and that's where it started. And you know, it's been a long run, but I mean, I'm satisfied with where it is. You know, and I really feel like, so it's not unlike Fiddler in that, you know, you have dialogue and then the songs. That's the kind of musical I like. Showboat, you know, all those, Sound of Music, those are just first rate to me. So.
Interesting. Anything you would have, when you look back and you hear things now, is there anything you would have told yourself back in 1986 or any time between that you wish you could have gone back and told yourself, or maybe you keep in something that you learned from looking back that helps you as a dad or as a husband? I know you had mentioned your family, so is there anything that you heard in that music when you heard it again that kind of sparked something that, you know, either gave you a lesson or brought you back somewhere where, you know, you maybe wish you had the knowledge you had today?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because the truth of the matter is The World in Blue was an albatross around my neck. Once I started it, I'm so stubborn, I won't stop. If I start on something, this is what's going to happen, and this is what we do. And I couldn't back down on that. If I start a book and I hate the book, I think it's a bad habit not to finish a book, because you want to finish your next one. I hate the book, I read it all the way through.
The discipline of it.
Discipline. If I went back in time, I might have given myself really bad advice, like don't do it. It's really hard and it's really big, and it's gonna, because it weighed on me for many, many years. And you know, I always knew I had this thing back there. When it first was unearthed, I brought the tapes and the recordings. I was coming to Boston, and I went to see, a dear old friend of mine, John Laurenti, who's really a good guy. He's in the radio and broadcast business. He's been a programming director for like 25 years. And we sat down and listened to the whole soundtrack with the crummy tapes. And I kept having to say, okay, make believe this sounds good. And he said to me, those years back, and he was the first one to really say it, Greg, this is, you gotta run with this. You can't let this thing. And I worked on that, and then I said, yeah, I'll be done with it in a few months. And a few years later, and I would have told myself, how hard it was going to be. The King and I, there we go. I would have told myself, be prepared, because I wasn't prepared for that. And maybe I wouldn't have done it, but in all, I'm glad I didn't get that chance to go back in time. When I hear it now, second half of your question, when I hear it now, I hear the unbridled enthusiasm of a young musician. At that point, I'd been writing songs as a task, studying songs for 14 years. I'd kind of honed in on my style. And I just heard this energy of like a young person, just really enthusiastic, because I was set free when the recording studio came along. I was now free. I didn't have to listen to anybody else. I didn't have to say, no, don't play that part, play this other. Yeah, I could do it all. And when I had to, and the thing that was holding up the re-recording of the songs before Rob Fraboni rescued those tapes, was I was going up into the studio, and I could record everything just perfectly, but it didn't have that energy of that young guy, just like the racehorse coming out of the gate. And that's what I was complaining to Joe about. I said, because I had a much more disciplined energy,
But there's also the spontaneity of when you first write something and you get that imprint down, it always evolves.
Oh, yeah.
Either because of live performances or just time.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll never catch that butterfly again, so you really need to, I keep the tapes rolling.
Yeah.
I roll a lot.
Yep.
Because you just want to capture it like, oh,
Right.
wow.
But the nice thing about that, when we got those 9 songs back, because there's 20 songs in the world in blue. 2 of them are in production now. They haven't been heard yet. And I'm really, really proud of those. Those are great. I'm working on them with my older son, Chris. And, but there were a bunch of others, and 4 of those songs I put on my first solo album in 2018, Singlestone, because I always knew I needed to get good recordings of these, and eventually it was going to come. And then on my retroactive album, I put 4 songs. So I had 8 songs pretty well canned up, for when we released The Beast. But then then there's the 9 others, and I was going in and recording those and just couldn't get I couldn't get it. I couldn't find that enthusiasm, because maybe fortunately or fortunately, you become sort of like a studio musician, which is like you play what the song needs and you play it perfectly. You don't play a guitar solo to try to get it on the cover of Guitar Player magazine. You don't play the bass parts to try to get it on the cover. You play what it needs, and that's my mentality in the studio. But I didn't have that mentality when I was that age. I had this is wild. I can play these solos, and I was burning these solos, and and I said to my friend Lou the other night, I said, if a guitar player came in today and said, I'm going to record a solo for this song, and he laid down the solos I was laying down, I'd say, dude, you got to drink less coffee and play less guitar. But it's forgivable because of the enthusiasm within it, and that really escalated that. And now that I hear people getting replies and comments from people who heard it on Mark Skin or on Lou's show, they love that. That's the enthusiasm comes out. And again,
Oftentimes the artist himself John Lennon wouldn't listen to his stuff after he recorded it. He didn't want to hear it. A musician is too critical
right,
of their own work.
right.
So when you picked this up, or this up, did it inspire you to I want to do something like this?
Absolutely, of course.
And do you think
when
this
I
sort
was
of
a young
existed?
person in Sunday school, we did a field trip to see each of those shows. And I saw those both in Boston.
Really?
And that was one of the things. Hey, I saw Rex Harrison in My Fair Lady. I bought the tickets myself, but
Where was he? At what,
in
Wilbur?
yeah, one of the big theaters in Boston. One of the big theaters. They've shifted around, as you know, so I can't remember who's where
Theater
now.
District is not.
But I saw Rex Harrison and My Fair Lady. I mean, hello, what else is there? But you know, those things. The show Beatlemania, which was probably about 1980 it toured, that was a major eye opener for me because that was a true multimedia experience. Nobody knew the word multimedia didn't exist then. And what I was thinking about and I wanted for the world in Blue, what I described earlier, I wanted to incorporate all different artists, sculptures, architects, you know, photographs, and use this. I wanted to incorporate as many forms of art and media into it as I could, including the excitement of a live rock show, which are still powerfully exciting to me. So it had an interesting genesis, but Jesus Christ Superstar was a milestone. It was a milestone, and that was maybe the beginning of, you know, I mean, yeah, there was My Fair Lady and all the things I heard around my house, but now a musical comes out that is my kind of music, and that was a real inspiration. And I always wanted to write musicals, and I always wanted that. And then the band, almost as much as I loved being in the band and having my brothers in the band, in a lot of ways it was kind of a distraction. And then when I wanted to bring them back to go and do the musical, and I thought they'd be there to help push the record button for me when we were recording, again, it was just too far of a reach from them. And you know, we had already been through so much for 6 years that I think that nobody had any gas left in their tank. And then again, it was sheer stubbornness and the sheer desire to prove that I could do this alone that brought that home. I mean, if I had any idea what I was biting off when I first clicked that first record button, maybe I wouldn't have gone there.
Can you believe I can't find the dates on these records that, was it 1970, 69?
That would have been a little bit, well, I don't know, actually.
Because usually after 1970, when the P came out, where you could protect the record, along with the copyright, you would see PC 1970.
If you look on the label, on the record, it's,
I don't see it on Bell Records. On this, it's very, very tiny on the bottom. I do see a C, but I can't read the year. So my question was, if Jesus Christ Superstar inspired Godspell or vice versa. That's the gospel according to St. Mark.
well, they're such vastly, vastly different performances. They're vastly different.
With religious overtones.
With religion, right? So they have a common theme, you know. But I
Right.
mean, I don't know the answer, but I would not be at all surprised if they were totally blind to each other during the writing of it, and maybe they were even written concurrently without the other one knowing that it was being written. They don't really have that much in common, except for the fact is that, you know, the life of Christ.
I think we got like 5 minutes left, or,
73.
oh, 1973. Oh, thank you. We don't have 5 minutes left. Okay, I can't read sign language, at my age. So 1973 was a Godspell. Thank you, Aki, our producer, director here. I'm the producer, he's the director. Our director came up with it for us.
These musicals, it's interesting, and it's really a great coincidence that they were both built on a religious theme, because it gave them a broader acceptance. Like my church, my Sunday school brought us to see that. What an amazing thing. But
And what a memory for a child. Just to interrupt, Bell Records, how dare they not put 1973 on, Bell beat was Larry Utah, no disrespect, Larry, but then it became Arista Records.
oh,
So Larry created Private Stock, signed Blondie,
wow.
and Clive got rid of all of the acts except for Bay City Rollers, Barry Manilow, and Melissa Manchester. There's a little music history. But it's kind of nice to know the background of the music, because it's very important to me. So I would imagine then this came out before 73, probably 72, 71. Helen Reddy had a hit with I Don't Know How to Love Him, so that was around 70, 71. So this came first, which I thought was how it worked.
My understanding was that was Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber's college project. They wrote that in college.
didn't they write Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat before?
I don't know, and that one I didn't grab onto because it didn't stick with me, it didn't click with me.
Right.
But those did a few things. Firstly, they got broader acceptance because, I mean, you know, in America, what's a more widely accepted, you know, theme than Jesus Christ? And then the other thing is, for me, I'm looking at it saying, wow, my kind of music can be included in musicals. And then Tommy comes out, and then Quadrophenia comes out, and my whole game was shifted. And I had a new mark to try to hit, which I've never hit. I'll likely will never, but you know.
And you know what we don't have? New England Music City. So I'm 16 years old and I'm in high school. In New England Music City and Discount Records, I remember stacks of Jethro Tull albums. Stacks. I'm talking about like 500 from England. They're called parallel imports, which the industry kind of cracked down on. But you could buy the new Jethro Tull and stacks of Jesus Christ Superstar, just stacks of them, and they'd be flying out of the stores. It was a different era. How do you take the world in blue and you don't have that wonderful advertising of a record store with stacks of your musical play?
Right.
It was a different time, and it was exciting because it wasn't a CD and it wasn't a download. It was a physical thing you wanted to buy and take home and embrace. That's missing. Now vinyl's coming back, and you could do the World in Blue limited edition on vinyl,
Yep.
and that would excite people. But you've only got a Barnes and Noble or Newbury Comics or these places with the specialties of the high grade vinyl going for ridiculous amounts of money. I paid $3 for Iggy Pop. It's now 20 at Barnes and Noble, and it's high grade vinyl and 20 gram vinyl or something, right? And a slick cover. I paid $3 for this back in the day.
Wow.
And God bless, because Iggy's a great guy. Good for him.
So how does, and that's because I don't have a musical background. How does having access to music in the way we do today affect younger musicians? You know, I know you mentioned your son is a musician. So how have you seen that affected? Because my wife even says that there's something to, you know, and you mentioned reading the entirety of
The libretto that
jacket
comes
and,
with this. There's a booklet
right,
inside.
Right, and that's something that people look forward to as part of the experience. Where now, you know, you can stream all of these in seconds, right? And you have to. I'm sure that media still exists. The jacket, as we call it, still exists out there. But how has that affected the way a musician, you know, kind of gets into music, or what have you seen change in your generation of musicians within your family?
Well, the interesting thing now is most of the young generation, there's a measurable percentage that have never owned a physical copy of a piece of music. They've never owned a cassette tape, they've never owned an album. They're 100% on their phone or on their whatever player is, their computer. There was an incredible excitement with
A
that.
45 RPM with
Well,
a picture sleeve.
How about this? I remember when Let It Be came out, I think I was 11 years old. I went to the record store 2 weeks in advance. I paid for my record 2 weeks in advance. And when it came out, I went down to that record store, and that guy saw me, because I already had all the Beatles albums, and he knew me. I was a little kid. And he liked me. He was a nice man. And he saw me coming, and he had that record in my hands before I got to the counter. And you would go home, and you would touch this thing, and you'd look at the cover and the pictures
and the songwriters.
and the songwriters, and
And the
you'd read
producer,
it, everything,
George Martin.
producer, this, that, and you would listen to that thing, and you'd carefully put it on and carefully drop the needle, and you loved that thing because you paid for it with newspaper money or whatever it was. And
And the 45 was different from the Phil Spector produced album.
well, the 45s were kind of like one-offs. They didn't have the details, so you really wanted the albums. You really wanted that physical
Right,
thing.
but hearing the guitar loud on one Let It Be and, you know, not as loud on the other.
Right.
We love that stuff.
Right. Oh, yeah,
Because
yeah.
it made you, I mean, I remember talking to my mom in the car because I said, Let It Be, I love this song. It just come out, it's on the radio, and, you know, and mom's driving, and I'm just like, I'm 16, and I'm like, this is awesome. And I just remember being in Winchester, turning the volume up. We lived in Arlington, and mom's driving, and I think my brothers and sister were in the back. It's just, it stays in your brain. It doesn't happen today.
Want to hear something fun about paradigm shift and change? Last night I was with Walter, one of my dear Walter's
Walter's a DJ on Moxkin
Well, he's a
Radio,
librarian there. He's the
but
librarian.
he does a show.
He like helps produce a bunch of shows, I think, but he doesn't have his own slot. But he's been like one of my dear, dear friends for 40 years, and we were both crazy, enthusiastic Boston musicians together in our older days. And I sat down with Walter, and I had my laptop, and we were talking about, we were talking about the whole Rob Fraboni thing, and then about how music's produced, and the importance of mastering. So I said to Walter, I said, let me show you the importance of mastering. And I opened up my recording studio sits in my laptop, and I opened up, I forget which song it was. It was late, and it was late. I opened up Doing Something Right, and I said, okay, here is the mix that I did. And he looks at it, and he looks at the computer screen. He said, oh my God. And I said, well, it's easy. And I put the music on, so we're listening to my mix. And I said, here's the drums, and you can see the drums bouncing up in the meter. Here's your bass, first guitar, second guitar, blah, 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 blah. He's like, whoa. And I said, so this is my mix, okay? This is what I thought was the best I could do. He said, sounds great. I said, yeah, let's do this. We go out to YouTube. I look up the same song that was mastered by Michael Stern at LA Mix Labs, one of my great friends and great professional. Mixed the last Star Wars trailer. And I said, listen to what he did. And you listen to it. And Walter was like, oh my God, because they kind of tame it. And they put it so it's all in the right audio spectrum. And again, I could do this, but I couldn't do it as well. So you get the guys that do it.
They do it every
And he
day.
was floored. He had the best time. And then I said, well, here, Walter, here's a new song from the next album. I said, I said, every track that you hear will be replaced. But let me show you what I got. And I played this kind of guitar that I just plugged straight into the computer. And he goes, that's crazy. I said, well, let's put an amplifier on it. And I pop open the amplifier list and I pick it. He's like, wow. I said, that's how they do it. Boom, beefs up the sound. And he goes, that's incredible. I go, well, we're not done. Let's put some effects pedal on it. And I grab it, make up a pedal board, click, click, click. It was like this. And that's the thing, and that, he was floored. He said, that's how it's done these days. I said, that's how it's done. This is, but here's the thing about that. Tons of people, probably you could say most musicians, now have home recording studios. And you can take stuff and make music really fast, really fast.
Instant Karma, which was what John Lennon's Instant Karma was all about. He wanted to write a song in a day. It took them 7 days, where I now go into the piano room, and I'm writing songs at 2 in the morning on my iPhone, and I put them up on Spotify. They sound that good on the iPhone, out of that Whittier Drive piano room.
But you're
Couldn't do that back in
doing
the
solo
day.
stuff, and I know you're a pro, because I've
After 52 years, I'm just
Well,
veteran anyway.
I've only known you for 40, Joe, but you were the first band that I went out to see when I moved to Boston. I had to go out and see the Count.
I'm not worthy, thank you.
Oh, dude, you're it. I told you that. But
I climbed
but
through
now
ceilings.
what happens is
Literally.
is
Wow.
young people or new artists, they go home, they start putting these songs together. And you can the drums sound ungodly because you're picking these insane kits but they don't know how to mix them.
And it's
So
also
you
a
have
jungle, like you were asking about, the excitement of this. There's such a jungle of music out there.
Right. Well, the nice thing is that those of us that are smart enough to reach out to professionals for the critical time, I put an insane amount of time into recording the tones of my guitars, like the tones, everything to me, my bass tone. I want my guitars to sound, I want every recording to be the best one I've ever done. And I loved it. It might take me 5 or 6 hours to get a guitar sound, and then I'll blow the track down in 5 minutes.
Well, this goes to both of you. You have kids. Do the kids wear earbuds?
Not yet.
Yes.
So the earbuds.
Mine's only 5 in 6 months.
Oh,
Just
6 months
just
correct.
wait.
So, yeah, not
I
yet.
thought the 5-year-old might.
I'm lying. He did once on a flight but I have avoided it so far for no reason other than convenience. It's not, you know.
Well, it's a demand
So-
thing. When they start wanting to listen to music, then,
So you
Yeah.
spend all this time and energy and investment in making this sound great with, guy works with Scorsese and the Rolling Stones, and then it comes down to an earbud or a Dunkin' Donuts high-end treble but no bass when you go in.
that has been addressed, and I'll tell you how. My son Chris is a hip hop producer. Mainly, he produces me too. He can produce anyone. He's like that. But it is understood in the industry now that something, I don't know the exact numbers, but it could be as like 90% of music will be heard on a single speaker on an iPhone. So Chris will.
It's a new radio.
Well,
Yeah.
Chris will, it is the new radio. And Chris will mix on the big, the proper, K whatever monitors and whatever. But when he goes to final mix, he has a little thing called a mix cube. And it is designed to mimic a small single. So he'll do that mix and he'll say, okay, let's hear it in the mix cube. He'll flip it over in the mix cube and say, now we got to go back to the, and it's now, because in the old days we had the studio, we used to use these big, huge, like multi-$1,000 Uri time-aligned monitors that sounded perfect. And then
And
you'd
then
say,
you take the cassette out to your car.
right, and you take your cassette out to the car, and then you listen to it in the Yamaha NX10s, right, or whatever. You'd listen to them in that, but you're always taking you're going out to the car or going up to the little little boom box and hearing it there.
I want
Now-
Aki to get a mic because he's a producer too. Our director is a producer.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear his thoughts on this, maybe next time.
You gotta get him a hot mic.
Yeah, I mean, I go into the next room and listen to what it sounds like a room or two away,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
because it's the facility you're in, and if the room isn't right, you're not gonna hear what you would hear in another recording studio. So, Jimmy Miller told me when, a studio opened on the South Shore near where you are right now, I won't say the name, and they wanted us in there desperately. It's Jimmy Miller, and Jimmy said, "They're gonna let them work the bugs out, Joe. We're gonna go in and we're not gonna. There's so many bugs in a brand new studio. You got to work it out." And he was right. And you want someone else to test drive it.
So the end user is important. You have to understand the end user really well, it sounds like.
You want to get something that's going to excite people. And I don't know how to love them.
well, the overture of that.
yeah, the overture.
It's
That's
just insane.
powerful. And you don't want to have every step of the process is so essential, because you can take something that I mix in a studio, but you really want to have it mastered. And I put unmastered recordings out. It's fine. They're good. The general public doesn't get it, but when you get a mastering engineer, a George Marino, or up in Portland, Bob Ludwig or Rob Fraboni, these guys make it exciting. You want to play it over and over, a Beatles record. Instant Karma, I played that 5,000 times if I played it once.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. And it was Spector and Phil Spector, Yoko Ono, and John, with the 2 or 3 pianos and the 2 or 3 drums and that thick sound Spector would get. And it's All You Need Is Love is the riff.
Right.
So John took one of his old riffs, All You Need Is Love, and made Instant Karma as a solo, and it was fighting Let It Be. They both went to #1.
Wow.
And that was a glorious time, because he was still a Beatle, and he's doing this great solo record that would have been a Beatles song. But I think solo is one of the few instances where actually superior to the Beatles. Not superior to what the Beatles would have done with it.
Yeah.
They would not have done what Spector and John did.
Right. The hard thing about the Beatles was the democracy thing, and it sounds terrible, but I don't really believe in democracy when it comes to a band. I think that's why most bands break up, and I stopped doing that because I stopped wanting to negotiate with the other musicians how the parts should be played. I didn't want to negotiate. I look at Tommy and I look at Quadrophenia, and I think that maybe there's a chance that they could have even been slightly better if they just let Pete drive that car.
Did you ever notice when you go in a recording studio, if you let the drummer do a mix, the drums are up?
Oh,
You
yeah.
let a bass player do the mix, the bass is up. They focus on their instrument. And,
Right.
and as a producer, I have other people produce me. I like when someone's producing me. But if I'm producing a band, I put everything where it belongs. And one guitarist came up to me and he said, you're not a good producer, I'm not in the mix. I said, you were way out of tune, and I'm not gonna tune you up.
Right.
And your buddies are paying for this recording time. And he was beside himself, because all about ego, yet he was out of tune. And it ruined the record, and the other guitar handled it fine. So I have to make those critical decisions. One other thing, there's a band called Mace, and they found the song Rocking to the Top. You know Gary Hoey?
Oh, yeah.
Gary wrote it before he was known. So Mace is doing this song, Ron Finn, great lead singer, and I'm the producer, and I got Jimmy Miller and John Messina doing backing vocals. You got the Rolling Stones producer on background vocals, because he was a singer first. He was signed to a Columbia label, Jimmy Miller, when he was 19. So I got this great legend on backing vocals, Gary Hoey tune, who's amazing, Rocking to the Top.
I love Gary Hoey.
So the guitar player does this magnificent solo that I knew he could never do again. He goes, erase that, and I demand you erase it now. And I'm like, right, Bobby, go ahead and do another one. I said to Gordon, the engineer, do not touch that. That's the take. He spent an hour, take after take, and he walks in sheepishly. I'm so sorry, I told you to erase it. I said, do you think I'm listening to you? I said, I'm the painter here, not you, and you're the color red. And I take him up to the hallway. There's a painting, you're the color red, and you're bleeding all over the thing, but your buddies are paying for the studio time, and you just took an hour of their time. He learned a good lesson. But that's what a producer does. He makes sure everything goes right.
There's another funny thing that's making me think of. When we would go in the studio, Normandy was our main studio, and
Phil Green?
yeah, but we worked with Tom Soares and Leroy Radcliffe as our
I
producer.
love Leroy.
I love him. I love him. I dedicated. He'll be thanked on my next album posthumously as well. Leroy and Tom I thanked on my first two albums, and will always thank them, because when we went into the studio, I just had 1,000 questions. I first time I ever felt like as an artist I was home. And they were great. They taught me so much, and they'd answer my questions, and this is a condenser, and this is a cardioid, here's a tube, that we use them all, blah, 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 blah. But when we went in, you know, we were poor, so we would get the 11 o'clock p.m. studio
Sure.
time.
We all would.
Yeah, you'd get that overnight studio time.
It's cheap.
And you had it together. You went in there,
Yep.
you went down on those drum tracks, and everybody sat, and the whole rest of the band sat back behind the console, waiting for the drummer to get the take, and that's the hardest thing. Then the bass tracks go down, the drum tracks go down, and it was organized, and you're spending, you know, at that time, you know, we got discount rates and blah, 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 you're still laying out 80, $90 an hour, even in those days, that we're paying for. So you went there and you had it together. Mm-hmm. You were ready to go. If it would be like, okay, it looks like Sean's about 2 minutes away from finishing this drum track, Greg, go tune your bass. So as soon as that drum track is in the can, Greg tunes his bass, plugs in. And, you know, I used to just walk by. If it was a 5-minute song, it took us 6 minutes to get the bass track.
We did have investors in 86, 87. I gave Phil Green 25 grand.
Yeah.
You know why he's my friend for life. Maybe,
But,
you know.
but no, here's the cool thing now. But now,
The Motown
so when
project.
we record, there was always kind of a pressure. Not kind of a pressure. There was a pressure. Now,
There's less pressure when you have an investor.
well, yeah, I know. But now, but the other thing too, you wouldn't hit record on that tape until you were ready, because you didn't want to have to go over it too many times, because the tape would lose its magnetism and you wouldn't get as crisp a track. So there was all these pressures. And now, it's like, you know, you finish a track, oh, I like that track. Maybe I'll say, nah, delete. You don't care. And there's no pressure. You don't have time constraints. You don't have to worry about the tape being unmagnetized. I've done, you know, 4 or 5 takes of a song, which is a luxury of a, you know, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to try this guitar track, you know, I'll try this guitar with rhythm 1 track, then I'll try my Gretsch, then I'll try my, you know, whatever the guitar is, I'll try it with my Strat. I'll try 3 or 4 different tracks of the same track with 3 or 4 different guitars. That's like a luxury we never could have done, because that, in the old days, that would have meant that you had to record on a track and then wipe it out and reduce the quality of the next thing that would be printed there. And I still think that way in the studio. When I go in the studio, I still feel like I'm paying $80 an hour to be there, plus my guys. And I still organize my thoughts and my checklists. Everything starts off with a checklist. And I was working with my son Chris, and he's a hip hop producer, and he uses different software than I do. And he's looking over my shoulder, and he goes, Dad, he's treating this like it's an old 24 track. It's like, come on, we're in the 21st century. And I said, Chris, that's exactly how I want to treat it, because that is my paradigm. And he's like, yeah, that's cool.
We're talking to Greg Paquette, musician who wrote a musical play, and our time is running short. We got about 5 minutes, and Darren Costa, my co-host, here on Visual Radio, the first of 2023. And I just, because we have 5 minutes left, I want to make sure we capture everything you want to talk about with the World in Blue.
Okay.
So this has been a great, fascinating discussion. We could spend 3 hours here. Are you having fun, Darren?
I am, of course.
Informative.
Look at him.
I've learned a
He's
lot.
having a
I've learned a
blast.
lot, of course.
He's a city councilor upstairs here.
Nice.
Told you, I didn't have as enriched musical upbringing, so it's fun to hear about all this.
Well, that's
Record
good.
collectors
That's
are
good, because I need
compulsive.
someone to fix a parking ticket for me, so we're gonna do great.
I got a couple parking tickets myself that I had to trust me.
Well, I have to get my parking sticker. They mailed me the envelope and it wasn't in there. So I go up there, she goes, I need your title and registration. It's like, after the show, going downstairs. The excitement of the vinyl is OCD. If you buy records, and I got 40,000 units, and that's nothing. You know, David Beaver's got like 200,000. Bruce Bennett up in New Hampshire, I think maybe 500,000. Garnix up in Lowell has 1 million vinyl albums. It's a store. So I'm like a small timer with only 40,000. It's phenomenal thinking of that, because I was trying to get my hands on them this morning, and I had to go through cases because I'm just labeling them. It's so much work. But if we're doing this all these years later, Greg, there is a reason. Why are we obsessed with music? Why are we passionate about music? And there's, that we put in all these years. I mean, his band, I'd love to do the demo that got the deal with Option One. Are you game for that question?
Sure.
Okay, what was the demo that got the deal for Option One?
My brother was a limousine driver in Boston, and he used to drive for all kinds of people. And we had been to Normandy, and we produced. Leroy was in Germany, so I produced a couple of songs, just myself and Tom, and we went into Normandy and did those. But the nice thing was by the time we did that, we had all these masters. We had a bunch of 24-track masters that we'd accumulated, and that landed with a guy at MCA Records that really liked the band, and wanted to give us a deal, and we were talking about that, and things went poorly for him. He got prostate cancer, and that went on, and then the guy that took his place really didn't want anything to do with us, and that was that. But
Can I ask the name
we
of the
still,
guy?
we still have all those masters.
Well, can I ask the name of the guy, or would you rather not? Okay, so that often happens. Joe Perry got signed to MCA with one dude, and then another dude comes along, and they don't want the Joe Perry project. And with
That
Mark
was very
Bell
much
on-
it. That was very much it.
When the A&R guys leave, they want their own agenda.
Well, that's their job too. So, like at the time I was angry, bitter, but you gotta own it all. You gotta own it all. And
But you got to that next level. Someone said, we want this guy, and that's MCA Records, and that was key.
well, we did, and it was, and there were some others too. It was an interesting thing, but it's probably good it didn't happen. I was probably a pretty obnoxious, pretty arrogant guy then, and maybe wouldn't have, handled any type of success very well. So it's probably really good. I mean, I had to, things happen for a reason. But the thing is too, you bring up the Option One thing. Thank you. I mean, I look back. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people didn't invest in good studios, and didn't invest in good engineers, and didn't invest in good producers.
And you were down in Normandy.
And we did.
New Kids
We
on the
did.
Block, Beaver Brown.
I met John Cafferty. I met Duke Robillard there. It was amazing to me just to go there, and I loved it. And there were great people there. But we made the investment. We spent a lot more money than we needed to record. But now, guess what? I listen to these now, and I am just so proud of this work that we did.
And we're proud of you, and believe it or not, we got 60 seconds left. So Darren, any final words?
No, thank you. It's nice to meet you, and congratulations on bringing to life what you so passionately did years ago. I'm very happy.
Thank you. Thank
got
you so
the
much.
Author and composer of The World in Blue,
World
a
in Blue.
musical play. And I'm Joe Villone. This is Visual Radio, the first of 2023, 28 years. Thank you to Akanyele Staples. Thank you to Darren Costa, Greg, Chris for being our driver. Designated driver in the middle of the day is Greg's cousin Chris. And Mayor Di Maria and everyone here at Everett City Hall for this wonderful facility. And everyone in Everett has to come down, meet Ak, and get your own show. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Greg. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you. Thank
That
you.
was
It
great.
great
Thank
to
you
hear.
so
Yeah,
much.
it's great to
Very,
hear.
very relaxed. Got very nice.
Okay,
kinda
cool.
Chill
Yeah,
tone.
this is very new to me. So Joe's my.
No. That was a chill tone.